And good morning again from our Fox 9 streaming center. You've, of course, been watching gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Apple River stabbing trial across our Fox 9 digital platforms. Monday morning, we are into the second full week of this high-stakes trial. Nicolae Miu, his fate soon lying in the hands of the St. Croix County jury, facing 5 total counts: first-degree intentional homicide, 4 counts of attempted intentional homicide. We just heard there from the Regions Hospital surgeon, Dr. Brian Meyer, about some of the injuries, about blood alcohol levels, about how the injuries were sustained. The doctor there saying this is a case he will remember just based simply off of the severity, if you will, the deep penetration of the knife into victim A.J. Martin. He also tended to Riley Madison. And before Dr. Meyer took the stand for his brief testimony there about the treatment of those injured that day, we heard from Owen Peliquin, one of the young men tubing, good friends of Isaac Schumann, tubing with Isaac and the rest of that Stillwater group or so, half a dozen strong. They, of course, engaged with Nicolae Miu. He did admit taunting Miu at times, but Owen certainly describing being fearful, Miu not saying anything, staring, and that while the defense did ask him, could the tubers have gone past him, he seemed to indicate they could have, but in that moment, he just did not feel they should. He was interested to watch this whole entire encounter play out as the young adults from the Carlson tubing group came in, and we now know the stabbing would unfold. With that, I want to bring in a friend of Fox 9 here, criminal defense attorney Marsh Halberg Criminal Defense. He's joining us via Zoom. He has been monitoring much of this trial, including all of the testimony this morning. Marsh, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Just wanted to get your knee-jerk reaction to what we've heard this morning so far.
Yeah, thanks. It's interesting morning. You kind of wonder how they plan to finish this whole thing up. We're already kind of thinking at our end going, because you always want to finish on a high point emotionally and where the prosecution and what order they've lined their witnesses up in. So we're kind of second guessing that a little bit or wondering how they'll play that out. We thought Mr. Peliquin might come later in the in the parade, so to speak, but I appreciate they started with him. Few things I think for viewers to recognize is if you're ever called as a witness, I don't care how smart you are, I don't care how witty you think you are, you generally don't want to try to debate the other lawyer on the stand. They get to ask the questions, they control how you answer, when you answer, what the question is, and that's usually not easy to do. So sometimes it's easier just to give up the obvious. For example, when they asked Mr. Peliquin, were you taunting him? He goes, well, no, I wasn't. And they showed the photographs of him doing this kind of a thing. And clearly that was that. He said, well, I guess some could. So that's just kind of that thing. I thought he could have been a little less argumentative. But again, he's a young man and, he's confident in himself, which most young men are. So you kind of take that for what it is. So I thought I really have appreciated through this whole trial the very professional, polite style that the judge is also bringing to this courtroom. We've all seen trials or clips of trials where it gets out of control or the attorneys are playing more to the TV camera than they are to the jury, and that's not happening here. I think the style of cross has been extremely polite. And part of that is for both sides is we've got so much of this on video, right? So imagine how different each of our impressions might be of a witness. Like Mr. Peliquin, for example. Imagine you didn't have his video, and only way you could create the picture of what he did or what he saw was his own testimony. Now compare that then to what's on the video, and you get a whole different flavor or nuance as to what happened. So there's a certain amount of questioning that really is already set by what the video says. You're boxed in within the video for what you don't see, what might not have been heard, etc. And obvious other things he did, like saying his memory is better now, and the defense attorney politely brought that. Really, your memory gets better with age, not worse. He goes, yeah, I've had time to think about that. Or you never reached out to the police and asked them to add additional information or to correct things. No, I'm young. I didn't know how to do that. Really, you can't make a phone call to do that. So I thought there were some points that were made back on that. But again, the video speaks for what the video is.
And Marsh, my quick takeaway on Owen Peliquin, I thought the state could have done more with him to elicit some of that emotion. I know when we were talking about the build up to their case, so we had testimony all last week. It took a lot out of everybody. We didn't know exactly. We knew the state was entering its final phase, if you will. We knew we'd hear from the medical, the experts, if you will, the surgeon, perhaps an ME is coming to describe Isaac's injuries. We know kind of the final two, law enforcement, the lead investigators coming. We know probably the woman who did the jailhouse interrogation with Miu at the time, that she would come. So you're kind of down to your final witnesses. We knew Owen Peliquin was the last tuber with Isaac. He makes this wrenching call to the mother to report that Isaac's been stabbed, get to the river as fast as possible. He choked up a little bit. I mean, I know this isn't a TV show, but I kind of thought that they could have elicited a little bit more out of him to make him a more effective witness in this last phase of their case.
Absolutely. That's because we thought he might be the last witness, actually, because of that call, and you'd end with that moment, or somebody to talk more from the emotional standpoint. Because there's a certain, I don't mean to make light of this all, but there's a certain amount of theater in the courtroom. It is, and it's about telling a story in a powerful, emotional way, and you always want to end on a high point. What I am assuming, and it's not a bad call at all by the government, is Mr. Peliquin is just a young, kind of unpredictable witness in the sense we just don't know how he's going to play or what road he might go down. So you got to think the investigator is going to be the last witness. That's somebody you probably can kind of rehearse with more, have a more balanced approach, and more of a controlled finish. So maybe possibly not as strong, but predictable. So that's what I think you'd do.
And the lead investigator is allowed to sit in. We've heard him reference John Schultz. He's sitting alongside the prosecution, and obviously not been in the courtroom as much as you, Marsh, over the years, but that they're able to kind of tie everything together, and any loose questions that haven't been answered, we would certainly expect him at the end. The interrogation is going to be huge. The way it's documented in the criminal complaint that Miu lied. He had taken the knife off those he was encountering that day. So hearing what went on during that taped interrogation, how he was trying to spin what had taken place, that will be critical. I'm wondering, Marsh, in this whole encounter, there's been so much attention on the punch, so-called punch, strike, hit between Nicolae Miu and Madison Cohen, the blonde girl who was in his space. You heard Owen Peliquin there get asked quite a bit, what did you see? He didn't see it, but by deducing that he heard a punch or a noise, a contact, then he saw Madison Cohen stumble, that to him, Miu definitely hit her. How important, it is not on the Cockfield video, how important is who hits who throws the first punch? How important is it in the overall context of the murder charges Nicolae Miu is facing?
Well, it kind of goes to the whole big theme they have of self-defense, right? And in Wisconsin, you're going to wrap that whole self-defense thing together to look at. So the nuances of that are important. To me, the still frames of the blonde woman, again, I apologize, I don't remember her name, are just kind of looking really angry with an attitude, chirping at him, kind of speaks volumes to me on that. The fact that we are planning that the defendant's going to testify, you can bet that they've rehearsed that. We call that sandpapering in our business when we practice with our witnesses. Typically what we will do is for our client, we will have someone from our firm. I was a former prosecutor, so a lot of times I'll do that with my fellow partners. I go down the hall and I try to beat up our client as best I can with cross-examination to practice that and trick questions or trying to get emotional or trying to aggravate them. So they'll rehearse that. And that's not a negative thing or a sneaky thing, but they will practice what that testimony is because all the subtleties are there. So I think the testimony he gives is going to make or break this whole thing.
And by all accounts, he's going to testify. I'm just curious as we talk about the timeline. I know the state has said they'll go through today. The defense will get ready. We'll be prepared to start calling witnesses tomorrow. They did, I will point out to our viewers, call 2 of their witnesses out of turn last week because of the need for the Spanish interpreter in that courtroom. But as we think about that defense case, Marsh, is Miu right away, or does he is he the last voice that they hear, for the jury hears from before closings?
Yeah, kind of a classic debate we have on the defense side. Do you put them first and then clean up with other people, or do the opposite? I generally like to do my client last because it's the most predictable person. I've spent the most time with them, assuming they present well, and I think he will. So I think he could well be the last witness for them. And you really do start to time it out, just like you do in a sporting event. You look at how much time you got left on the clock and who's going to do what. You don't like to ever end a witness. For example, last Friday, you don't want to end a witness that the other side has the whole weekend to re-examine that testimony, to pick it apart, to plan on new, fresh questions for Monday. And attorneys, judges, juries we're just like this. We get tired, right? By a Friday afternoon, we're tired. We may not be as sharp on our questioning. The jury may not be listening as much. So we really look forward to Mondays when everybody comes in, they've had that big cup of coffee, they're really back being alert again. And so Mondays is a big day where when the government wants to make some points, today is to try to do that. You know, I thought the defense did with a doctor that was on, you know, generally for people, you know, when you go out drinking, generally there's an average of what's called 0.15 an hour you burn off. So you do the math. That's for an average 165-pound man. They will metabolize at a different rate than women. So the point they're trying to make with Riley or the other person who was a 0.09 is that they're really probably a 1.1, something like that at a higher level. That doctor pushed back, didn't want to get off into burn off and absorption rates, which I appreciate. But the defense made a good point of saying we know it's higher because there's no alcohol consumed between the time of the stabbings and the hospital visit. So we know that alcohol was being burned off. So I thought they did a nice job of working with the little information they needed. The point is we know it's higher.
Yeah. Marsh, just to kind of alert our viewers that we've now put that state seal back on your screen. We've kind of double boxed Marsh Halberg, our criminal defense attorney at Twin Cities, veteran lawyer, as you mentioned there, a prosecutor once upon a time in his career, now has a criminal defense firm in the Twin Cities. So as soon as we see the Judge Waterman, come back to the bench, we'll get you back inside. But I did have one question, and I know that the doctor has to serve. I mean, he's the trauma doctor. He's a surgeon. He's a surgeon who testified he saved A.J. Martin's life. A.J. Martin had his heart stopped for 9+ minutes, being rushed into surgery. So I don't know. My gut is the jury expects to hear that from him, and then we take a turn to the BACs. But I suppose Marsh, the doctor, he's the doctor, so they do have to ask him those kinds of questions, right?
Right. Yeah, you get it in when you can, and you piece it all together. Because at the end of the trial, a lot of this is all fluff, right? They're going to focus on the big things. And again, we're in this day and age where it's such a big phenomenon now. Trials are so different. Everybody's got a camera, right? Every single one of us carries a camera. And especially younger people, as soon as something happens, that camera is out, taking pictures, taking video. And this has gotten to be such a bigger part of our courtrooms now, is the playing of video for what we do.
Yeah. Marsh Halberg, thank you so much. You're going to be with us all day, so we'll see you at the lunch break. Right now, I want to take our viewers back to the bench. Judge Michael Waterman in the St. Croix County Circuit Court, Hudson, Wisconsin. State presenting its case. They're up next with their next witness.